Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay and you're watching Lindsayka Adventurer, and today we are adventuring through another Bible story just like we do every Friday. So today we are looking at the story of Deborah, and this is found in Judges chapter 4. So let me just give you a little bit of backstory of what's going on in the book of Judges and why Deborah had to come up on the scene in the first place. So basically, this is a time after the Israelites have come out of their wanderings in the wilderness, after they've gone through the Exodus, they've left Egypt, they've gone through the wanderings in the wilderness for 40 years, they've come into the promised land, and they have partially conquered the nations of the promised land. And now they've kind of been settling in, and over time, the new generation of Israelites have kind of forgotten about God's law, have forgotten about what He's done for them. They're just getting really comfortable doing their own thing, and as time progresses, they continually fall further and further away from God. And this is seen numerous times throughout the Bible. This is just part of human nature, it seems. And honestly, we still do that today. But anyway, so what's going on is these people are worshipping the idols of the nations around them. And they're also struggling because they seem to keep wanting human leadership, something tangible to hold on to, a tangible God, so like an idol, a tangible leader, like a king. They keep wanting this tangibility with their relationship with God and with what they've been called to do, and yet God is not giving them that thing that they want, and so they're just doing their own thing. They're following their own ways, and they're now worshipping idols. And because they're worshipping idols, and they're doing evil things, God takes His hand away from the Israelites. He's like, I'm not invited right now, so I'm just gonna step back and let you see how, what the consequences of your actions are. And He allows the nations around them to grow stronger and to rise up against the Israelites and put them into a state of bondage, of suppression, of oppression, of servitude, of slavery, of, they're coming and killing and attacking the Israelites, and the Israelites cry out to God and they're like, oh no, what's happening? Our life is so hard. And when they're crying about, the consequences of their actions, it moves God's heart to pity, it says, and He raises up a deliverer. He raises up a judge, and this word judge is shafat, or shofet. So that word judge, there's a lot that goes into it, but very, very briefly, it basically means somebody who is a hero, somebody who delivers them out of their bondage. So, you can look up that word for yourself and get the really deep insight that comes along with that and how it represents God. But very briefly, a judge is a hero in this context. And so God rises up these judges, and before Deborah, there's maybe 2 or 3 of them, and they're all male up till this point. And so he gets this guy to do something really amazing, and it defeats the enemy and brings the Israelites out of bondage, and they're all good. And then, a few years go past, maybe 20, 30, 40 years, and then that judge will die, usually of old age. Not in every case, but usually. And after that judge dies, then the Israelites don't have this good, moral, upstanding leader to guide them in the right direction or to remind them of what God has done for them, and they forget once again, and then they go back and they serve their idols, and they actually get deeper and deeper into sin than they were before. And then They cry out to God, God is pitying them, he brings up another one, delivers them, and the cycle continues. And then over time, they're just digging themselves into a deeper hole. They're getting themselves into more sin, just doing worse things than they had done before. So, all right. So yeah, we've got Othniel and Ehud and Shamgar. So those are the three judges that came before Deborah. And then Deborah rises up on the scene. And so now we're going to have a look at what Judges chapter 4 says, and kind of unpack it a bit more from here. So Judges chapter 4, starting in verse 1. It says, "When Ehud was dead, the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who dwelt in Harosheth Hagoyim." Now, I love giving you guys a little bit of geography. I feel like it really helps to understand what's going on a lot better. So Hazor is in the north of the land of Canaan, land of Israel. And this area is a lot more flat, gentle rolling hills than in the south, where it's much more steep and hilly. And yeah, so that's a little bit of geography for you, and that comes in handy to know because in the next verse it says, "And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, for Jabin had 900 chariots of iron, and for 20 years he harshly oppressed the children of Israel." So let me just go into this 900 chariots of iron for a second. So that's a really big, very technologically sophisticated kind of army that this guy has got. And there's no way that the Israelites would have anything like that kind of technology. Like, this is in the Bronze Age. If we look at it from like a secular historical sort of perspective, this time period is Bronze Age. And yet this king has got 900 chariots made out of iron. So iron is generally not a very typical metal to be used. It's very, very sophisticated, very cutting edge. And this king has got 900 chariots, which means he has at least 900 horses. And horses were very expensive. You know, horses, there's a lot that goes into just producing a single foal, like a baby horse. And yeah, it would have been super expensive to have that many horses. It would take a long time to gather up that many. And to buy them from the various countries around, whoever had like the best stud or whatever. And so this guy has got at least 900 horses, 900 iron chariots to trail after the horses. And so this army is really huge, really sophisticated, and the Israelites have like got nothing against that, basically. Okay. Oh, and the chariots, obviously, so the area, yeah, that this king reigned was in that flat, gentle sloping sort of area where the chariots would have done a pretty good job of just, you know, smashing their enemy however they wanted to. Yeah, and that would have been like less effective in the south, but they're reigning up in the north at this point. Excuse me, my nose is itching. So, verse 4, it says, "Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time." Okay, so, and then it says, "And she would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the mountains of Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment." So, where she lived, or where she would sit, I guess, would be pretty close to her house. She wouldn't want to walk very far, is in the mountains of Ephraim. And Ephraim is kind of like in the center of the land of Canaan, the land of Israel. So she's like in a very central location for all of the Israelites to come to her for whenever they needed something taken care of, whenever they needed a word from God. Yeah, they would come to her, and she was a prophetess, so she heard God's voice, or she would see whatever he was presenting to her, whatever way he was communicating with her about whatever topic. And then Then in verse 6 it says, Then she sent and called for Barak, the son of Abinoam from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, Has not the Lord God of Israel commanded, Go and deploy troops at Mount Tabor. Take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali and of the sons of Zebulun. And against you I will deploy Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude at the river Kishon, and I will deliver him into your hand. And there's a question mark at the end. So what I see happening right here is that God is speaking to Barak through Deborah, and he is calling Barak out, or Deborah is sending to him to call him out and say, hey, do you remember that God has already spoken to you about this topic? How come you haven't been doing it yet? Do you have some kind of explanation for yourself? And this can either be seen as a confirmation, like in a public sense, that yes, what God has told you to do, maybe in a more private way, in a now more public way, he's saying, go and do that. But what I see in this story, and it's confirmed as we keep reading, as we see what kind of character Barak has, he seems to be really dragging his feet. So, in the next verse it says, And Barak said to her, If you will go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. So he is being a bit demanding right here, actually. He's insisting that Deborah goes into battle with him. And I see this as being stubborn, manipulative, and this manipulation and stubbornness is coming from a place of fear, not trusting in God to give him the victory without her, the prophet, nearby. Like, obviously, like some people, I've been reading a bunch of commentaries to kind of grasp this story. And some people say that it was really wise of Barak to say this thing, to have the prophet with him nearby. That way he could have all the answers that he required like that. But other people say, and I agree more with this, that he was just being stubborn and digging his heels in and saying, look, if I have to go, then you have to come with me, otherwise it's not going to happen. Obviously, I know God's called me, but I'm not going to go unless my demands are met. And it sounds like that from what she said, the reminder, that Barak has heard these instructions before, and that she is reminding him that he's dragging his feet to even have to see her and to follow through with the instructions that he was already given. So, like this guy doesn't want to do his job, doesn't want to do the thing that God has called him to, and now he's trying to drag somebody else along with him just because he doesn't want to do what he's told unless it's like his way or the highway, basically. So when I was reading this and when I saw the way he reacted and saying, I won't go unless you go with me, I was actually reminded of a story from Exodus chapter 33 and verse 15. And Moses is asking God to go with them, with him and the Israelites, and refuses to go on without God. So in contrast, Barak is placing his trust in this woman, this prophet, and insists that she go with him. So he's not saying, God, I'm not going to go into this unless you go with me. He's saying, Deborah, I'm not going to go into this unless you go with me. And so I really see that he is idol worshipping in this sense, saying that, Deborah, you have to come with me because I place my trust in you and your word. And he doesn't actually have that relationship with God himself. And I completely get where he's coming from, because I have actually been in this position for a while, for far too long. And it's only been in, semi-recently that I've kind of come to realize or come to really face what I've been doing, where I've been hearing God's voice through other people, through, other prophets on YouTube or people in my life who hear God's voice. And so for me, I see myself as Barak in this sense, as this stubborn, person digging the heels in, not wanting to go anywhere without that person or without that prophetic voice in my life, instead of actually cultivating that relationship directly with God. And so we see what happens when Barak does this. In the next verse, Deborah says, I will surely go with you. Like, I'll do what you're asking. Nevertheless, there will be no glory for you in the journey you are taking, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. So this verse, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of like a mic drop in a way. Maybe that's not the right terminology, but like she's like, okay, cool, let's do what you say. However, like plot twist right at the end, it's not going to work out so well for you in the end. Like the war will be won. It'll all be just as God said originally, but just because of your attitude, just because of your lack of trust and faith in God directly, the glory will not be yours. Yeah. So this lack of relationship with God, this lack of trust in God alone, but instead in this type of idolatry for God's messenger, his audible voice through her, results in the glory being stripped away from Barak and given to a mere woman. In this culture, that would have been the ultimate blow to this guy's ego. Like, he's like, all right, we're going to go out to battle. All right, let's do it. I'll finally consent to going and you have to come with me. And she's like, all right, let's go. Cool, let's do it. However, because of your attitude, it's just, yeah, the glory will not be yours, but it will be given to somebody who's much, much lower in the societal like structure, like the lowest rung of society, like we talked about in Ruth and Boaz. How women are just so much considered so much lower in society. And so from actually this moment onwards, we might assume, if we hadn't read the whole story before, that, oh, there's already one woman in this story, maybe God's going to give the glory to Deborah. And then there's like a plot twist from that as well. So there's actually two women who are getting the glory in this sense. Deborah is being raised up as this prophetess in this era of male, judges, and now she is this deliverer. But then there's also this other woman who is just like a random on the scene kind of, and the glory will be given to her. So let's continue with that. Oh, actually no. So Barak could have enjoyed the glory and victory, but instead he just fought hard in semi-obedience, a rebellious form of obedience, but this ended up with no personal gain for him in the end, really. Like, God presented him with this opportunity to have the glory for himself. Not that we ever want the human to get the glory for ourselves, but like God does allow us to enjoy the fruit of our labor. But in this sense, Barak is just working really hard, doing what he's called to do in this half obedience, this acting of obedience, but not this attitude of obedience. And because of that lack of the attitude of obedience, and his own stubbornness, his own pride, his own manipulation and fear, God's like, no, you're not going to get anything out of this in the end. Okay, let's keep reading. So, Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh. He went up with 10,000 men under his command, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber the Kenite, of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, had separated himself from the Kenites and pitched his tent near the terebinth tree of Zaanaim, which is beside Kadesh. Okay, so there's this random guy who is distantly related to the Israelites, kind of through marriage by Moses' father-in-law. And he has just kind of isolated himself from his own relatives. He's gone off on his own, and he's taken his family with him, and now he is allied. Hold on, we haven't actually read that part yet. So, and they reported to Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So yeah, he's now actually allied to Sisera, so the enemy of the Israelites. So he's, this guy, Heber, him and his family have left their tribe. They've kind of gone off by themselves, and now they're allied to the enemy of the Israelites. And so Sisera gathered together all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the people who were with him from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you?" So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak, and Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away on foot. Okay, so what's going on here is that the word of the Lord comes through Deborah, and she tells Barak, all right, now let's go. This is the day. This is the time. We have to obey in this moment. Let's just go. And what I love here is that the Lord started the war. He said that I will call out the troops of, actually it says, I will deploy Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his multitude at the river Kishon. So he sets the time, he sets the place. He's like, I'm pitching these two armies against each other, and this is God starting the fight. And then not only is he starting the fight, but he is the one who's routing the army. Some commentaries think that there was angelic forces involved as well. It wasn't just like, oh, we've got our own 10,000 men against these 900 chariots, but there was actually like army involved, angelic involvement in this battle. We don't really see that through the English translation, but if you have a close look at it, there is more of an allusion to this in the original language. Yeah, so God is starting the fight, he's winning the battle, and he's, routing the army. What does it say? Yeah, and so at this point, Sisera, the guy in charge of the army of the enemy, he jumps out of his chariot and he runs away on foot, like a coward, basically. So Sisera, I mean, he's already the enemy, but he's clearly not a guy that we want to look up to ourselves either. He's just running away. So Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. So out of the 900 chariots, 899 people died. And then there was this one guy, the guy in charge. He is the only one left alive at this point. However, Sisera had fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. Okay, so this is where we see that there's like this alliance that's been formed rather recently, and there's this wife of the ally of this enemy, and Sisera would likely have known that. If he is the commander of the army, he would know all the allies, where they live, all that kind of thing. And so he's like, oh, I know who these people are, what this tent is. I'm going to go and hide there. And now this wife of this ally is doing something very tricky, and in the culture at the time, completely diabolical. Like, you don't trick your ally and kill them in your own dwelling. That's just really abominable. Like, you just don't do that. So I don't even know why she did this. Like, there is no statement about her intentions, about her her reasoning for doing this. We don't know if she was actually Israelite herself before she married Heber. Yeah, we really don't know what she's doing, but obviously this is God working through her in like a kind of really gory kind of way. God works in crazy ways. So he goes there and he's obviously exhausted, like battle takes it out of you. And he said to her, well, actually, she went out to meet him from the tent and said to him, "Come here, my lord. Turn aside, my lord. Turn aside to me. Do not fear." So she is being inviting and saying, "Hey, look, I'm your ally. Come here. Let me help you." And he, fully trusting her, went into the tent, into her tent. So there's, in these times, the women would have their own tent for likely their own hygienic purposes. And it would be really crazy for anyone to think, oh, let's look for Sisera in the tent of a woman. Like, that would not happen. Like, a guy would not go into a woman's tent. So he is trusting her and thinking this is a really smart thing to do. Like, nobody's going to look for me here. And she's like, yeah, let's go, let's hide. Let me hide you. And she covered him with a blanket. Now, he's probably exhausted, so he might be being covered with a blanket to be hidden, like under the blankets, or it might be like, just lie down, have a sleep. Could be a bit of both. Then he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty." Like, he's obviously been running for a while to get to this place, and he's like, doesn't have a water bottle with him. "Please give me something to drink because I'm thirsty." So she opened a jug of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him. So she gave him something to drink, but it wasn't water, it was milk. And a lot of us know that drinking milk, especially warm milk, before you lie down is likely to help you fall asleep. And so she's like, all right, let's knock him out. Let's give him a sedative. Let's give him some milk. So she gives this milk ever so sweetly. "Oh, yes, here, let me quench your thirst with this milk." And so he goes and has a sleep. And he said to her, "Stand at the door of the tent, and if any man comes and inquires of you and says, 'Is there any man here?' you shall say no." So that's like, all right, just keep me hidden. Don't let anyone know I'm here. And then Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple, and it went down into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So he died. So he's lying there having a good old nap. He's had his nice warm milk. He's under a blanket. Thinks he's safe, when really that's the last thought he's ever going to have. Something I read talked about how women in this time were the ones to actually set up the tent. So they would have been very used to handling a tent peg, which is like a big, thick, heavy piece of metal or whatever, or maybe a piece of wood to drive into the ground to hold the tent ropes. And so she's got this heavy hammer, she's got this big, sharp piece of wood or metal or something, and she knows how to strike it, one good blow, nice and strong, and she does it in one swift move, and that's it. The leader of the enemy is completely dead. He's gone, and it's kind of gory. It goes through his head, down through the other side, and into the ground. So this is a big hunk of wood or metal. Yeah, so he died. And then, like, I'm guessing, like, immediately afterwards, like a few minutes later, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said to him, "Come, I will show you the man whom you seek." And when he came into her tent, there lay Sisera, dead with the peg in his temple. Yeah, so what I got out of this was that Barak has killed all 899 of these other soldiers in the army, and he's just got the last guy, the icing on the cake, and he's probably feeling pretty good, like, yeah, we just killed basically the entire army, let's just go deal with this one last guy. And he's probably even forgotten at this point what Deborah has said, that he's going to, you know, not have the glory, that it's going to be given to some woman. And so when he's pursuing, he's chasing after this last guy, then this woman comes out to him. I bet like the ominous music sort of begins in the background of his mind going, oh dear. And she very calmly comes and says, hey, I have somebody to show you. Come and have a look. And there he is dead. And if it was only a few minutes or an hour or so after this took place, I can imagine that Barak would have been like, oh, I was so close, and yet I was so far, and it would have just been driven home. Like, when God has spoken to me and he's given me warnings about things, or he's made his will clear, but I haven't taken it on board and I haven't really listened and I haven't known what to do with this information, it's only after the warning is fulfilled and the thing comes true and I realize exactly what God was saying in hindsight that it just hits me like a ton of bricks, and I'm like, oh, this is what you were saying. Oh, this is the actual consequence of my actions. And it just weighs so heavy. Yeah. Yeah. The glory was so close and it was yet so far for Barak. Like, he made that one decision and that one small choice, attitude, whatever it was that set him on this path. That's all that needed to happen. He obviously didn't repent. He wasn't even really given much of an option. He was told at the very start, you know, once before, that he needed to go and go into battle. And then Deborah had to remind him. And when he was reminded, he chose to take this attitude and be demanding. And when he chose that response, that's kind of what set his course to the place that it ended up in the long run. The battle was won and the enemy was defeated, but because of his stubbornness and rebellious spirit, the chosen one worked so hard for so little. Jael was an unexpected fulfillment of the prophecy. Like we were talking about earlier, how we would have maybe at first assumed that it would be Deborah who would have taken the glory. She was even technically an ally of Sisera, so we would never guess that an ally of Sisera would have taken the glory for Israel's win. She was not even Israelite, but married to a man descendant from Moses' father-in-law. So this brings us to the point where there's another woman who is outside of the covenant that God is highlighting to us at the moment. God loves bringing in these random outcasts from society. This woman, we don't know what her background is, but honestly, culturally in those times, it doesn't matter what her background is. It's all about the man's lineage. But she is considered outside of God's covenant, and yet she is the one taking the glory for God's win. It's so crazy. So the Lord started the war. He gave the victory. He marched before the army and made it all happen. And he gives the glory to whoever he chooses. And I think my encouragement for you all today and for myself is to really remain in relationship with God, to listen to his voice, to follow his leading, to continually be in that relationship with God and submitting your own attitudes and emotions to his will. And letting him lead. And we may or may not get the glory in all of this, but I think it's more likely that we will, have the abundance that he wants for us in this life. When we are in alignment with his will, and that includes definitely our inward our attitudes and our thoughts. Yeah, not just our lip service and saying, all right, I'll do what you say, but I won't be happy about it kind of thing. So anyway, I hope that this blessed you. I hope, honestly, this story was a bit of a fish slap in the face to me. And I kind of hope it is to some of you. Of course, I don't want to actually be slapping you with the face with the fish, but look, if you need to be convicted, please be convicted, please change your ways and continue to be in close relationship with God and yeah, draw closer to Him. Yeah, so I hope this blessed you and that you got something out of it. Please let me know in the comments what was something that you learned, something that's new to you, and yeah, something that you can take with you, something that you can change and go forward in from what you've heard in the story. Also, I'd love to know what other stories you would like to hear, and we'll see how God feels about that in the future. Yeah, have a wonderful day, and I will see you again next Friday. Okay, bye.